We conferred and decided that I would instead do two opening acts. So this is from On Reading, which is a book that I translated and the reason I wanted to start with it is because it's the book where Proust really found his style and created the voice that would be the voice of remembrance of things past. He was stuck trying to write an autobiographical novel and decided to translate two books instead by John Ruskin, and one of them, called Sesame and Lilies, was about reading, and he added a long essay as a preface, half about Ruskin's idea of reading and half his own childhood memories of reading. And it's in those childhood memories that you really hear for the first time in any of Proust's writing the voice from Remembrance of Things Past. So I'm just going to read one paragraph of that, and then I'm going to segue to the very beginning of Swan's Way, so that way I won't have to get up again. He talks about reading in the dining room before lunch, and then he goes up to his room to do some reading after lunch, and then his parents make him go outside and play, but he sneaks off and does some more reading in the park, and finally finishes up by sneaking some hours of reading after bedtime. So I'm going to read the second of those. After lunch, I took up my reading again at once, especially if the day was a bit hot. Everyone went upstairs to retire to their rooms, which allowed me to return to mine right away, up the little staircase of close-set stairs. The room was on the only upper floor, but low enough that a child could jump down from the projecting windows and find himself on the street. Can everyone hear?
Yes.
Sorry, that's not Bruce. I would go to close my window, unable to avoid the greetings of the gunsmith across the street, who, under the pretext of lowering the awning, came out every day after lunch to smoke a cigarette in front of his door and say hello to the passers-by who sometimes stopped to chat. The theories of William Morris, so assiduously put into practice by Maple and the English decorators, dictate that a room is beautiful only on the condition that it contain only things that are useful to us, and furthermore that every one of these useful things, even an ordinary nail, be apparent, not concealed. Reproductions of a few masterpieces are permitted on the naked walls of these sanitary chambers, above the brass and completely uncovered bed. Judged by these aesthetic principles, my room was not beautiful in the least, because it was full of things which could serve no purpose at all, and which modestly concealed whatever objects did serve a purpose, to the point of making them extremely hard to use. But it was precisely those useless things, there not for my convenience, but rather seemingly for their own pleasure, which gave the room beauty in my eyes. Those high white curtains concealing from view the bed that was set back as though nestled in a shrine, the Marceline comforters, floral bedspreads, embroidered coverlets, and batiste pillowcases strewn across the bed, under which it disappeared during the day, like an altar in the month of the Virgin Mary under festoons and flowers, and which, in the evening, so that I could go to sleep, I would carefully put on an armchair where they agreed to spend the night. Next to the bed, the trinity of a glass with blue designs on it, a matching sugar bowl, and the carafe, always empty since the day after my arrival on the orders of my aunt, who was afraid of seeing me spill. Like instruments of worship, almost as sacred as the precious orange flower liqueur placed near them in a glass vial, which I would have no more thought of profaning or even thought myself able to use for my own personal needs than if they had been consecrated pyxes, but which I contemplated at great length before getting undressed, afraid to knock them over with a clumsy movement. The little crocheted stoles which threw over the backs of the armchairs a cloak of white roses that must not have lacked thorns, too, because every time I finished reading and wanted to get up, I discovered that I was caught fast on their little hooks. The glass bell, under which, isolated from vulgar touch, the clock gossiped in private to seashells brought from far away and an old sentimental flower, but which was so heavy that when the clock stopped, no one but the clockmaker would have been foolhardy enough to try to wind it up again. The white guiper lace cloth which, thrown like an altar cloth over a chest of drawers adorned with 2 vases, a picture of the Savior, and a blessed palm, made that chest resemble a communion table, and this image received the finishing touch from a prie-dieu tucked away there every day after the room had been done, but whose frayed edges were always getting caught in the cracks of the drawers and bringing their movement to a complete halt, so that I could never so much as get a handkerchief out without making the picture of the Savior, the holy vases, and the blessed palm fall over all at the same time, and without stumbling and clutching the prie-dieu to steady myself. Finally, the triple layers of light gauze curtains, heavy toile curtains, and heavier damask curtains, always smiling on me in their whiteness reminiscent of hawthorn, often glowing in the sunlight, but ultimately very annoying in their awkward, stubborn insistence on playing around the parallel wooden curtain rods and getting tangled up with each other and caught in the window whenever I wanted to open or close it, a second one always ready whenever I managed to free the first to take its place in the joints, as perfectly designed to snatch it up as a real hawthorn bush would have been, or the nests of swallows who had taken it into their heads to settle there, so that the act of opening or closing my casement window, apparently so simple, was one I was never able to manage without the help of someone else from the house. All these things, which not only were unable to answer a single one of my needs, but produced obstacles, even if minor, to the satisfaction of those needs, and which obviously had never been put there for anyone's use, filled the room with, in some sense, personal thoughts, with an atmosphere of idiosyncratic preference, as though they themselves had chosen to live there, and it pleased them. The same feeling that trees give off in a clearing, or flowers along paths and by old stone walls. These objects filled the room with a silent and multifarious life, with a mystery in which my own personality found itself at once lost and enchanted. They turned the room into a kind of chapel, where the sun, when it passed through the little red window panes that my uncle had intercalated at the top of the window, pricked at the walls, after turning the hawthorns of the curtains pink, its rays as alien and disconcerting as if the little chapel had been ringed by a surrounding nave of stained-glass windows, and where the sound of the bells arrived so resoundingly due to the proximity of our house to the church. In addition, the temporary altars during the major holidays connected us to the church with a path of flowers, that I could imagine them ringing inside our roof, just above the window from which I often greeted the priest with his breviary, my aunt coming home from vespers, or the altar boy bringing us some consecrated bread. As for Brown's photograph of Botticelli's Spring, or the plaster cast of the unknown woman from the Lille Museum on the walls and the mantelpiece in Maple's rooms, William Morris's only concessions to useless beauty, I must confess that my room had instead a kind of engraving that depicted Prince Eugene, terrifying and handsome in his hussar jacket, whom I was quite astonished to see one night in a great din of locomotives and hail, still terrifying and handsome, by the door to a restaurant in a train station, serving as an advertisement for a brand of biscuits. I now suspect that my grandfather had once been given the engraving as a gift from a generous manufacturer before putting it up in my room forever. But back then, I didn't care where it had come from. Its origins seemed to me historical and mysterious, and I didn't imagine that there could be multiple copies of the being I saw as a real person, a permanent resident of the room that I only shared with him, where I rediscovered him every year, always the same. It is a very long time now since I've seen him, and I suppose I shall never see him again. But if such good fortune ever should come to pass, I think he would have far more to tell me than Botticelli's Spring. I will leave it to men and women of taste, to decorate their homes with reproductions of the masterpieces they admire, unburdening their memory of the task of preserving a truly valuable image of those masterpieces by entrusting it to a carved wooden frame. I will leave it to men and women of taste to turn their room into the very picture of that taste and to fill it solely with objects their taste can approve of. As for me, I feel myself live and think only in rooms where everything is the creation, the language of lives profoundly different from my own, of a taste opposed to mine, where I can find nothing of my own conscious thoughts, where my imagination is excited by feeling itself driven into the heart of the not me. I feel happy only when I set foot in one of those provincial hotels, on Avenue de la Gare, on the church square by the harbor, with long cold hallways where the wind from outside battles and defeats the best efforts of the radiator, where the detailed map of the neighborhood is yet again the only decor on the walls, where every sound serves only to make the silence appear by shifting it somewhere else, where the rooms have a musty smell that the strong draught scrubs but does not remove, and that the nostrils inhale 100 times in order to carry it to the imagination, which is enchanted with it, which makes it pose like a model so that it can try to recreate it inside itself with all the thoughts and memories it contains. Where in the evening, when you open the door to your room, you have the feeling of breaking in on the life that lies scattered there, of taking it boldly in hand. When the door having closed again, you enter deeply into the room and walk up to the table or the window. The feeling of sitting down with that life in a sort of easy promiscuity on the sofa that an upholsterer in this provincial capital has done up in what he imagined to be the Parisian style. The feeling of caressing every inch of that life's naked flesh in the hope of arousing yourself with the liberties you're taking. When you put your things here and there, play the master in this room that is filled to overflowing with others' souls, and that preserves the imprint of their dreams, even in the shape of the andirons and the design of the curtains. When you walk barefoot on its unknown carpet, it is a hidden life you have the feeling of locking up with you when you go trembling all over to bolt the door, of pushing in front of you onto the bed, and finally of lying with, under large white sheets which come up over your face, while nearby the bells of the church toll for the whole city the insomniac hours of dying men and lovers.